Hello and welcome to GryphonArt, and today it's my hope to inspire brides-to-be or party organisers in search of some form of tabletop gift. Now before we get creative, I do like to show you the project up close, just in case photographs and text have been a bit misleading and you end up getting halfway into this video before you realise that actually this isn't really for you. So let's take a quick look at the box and its contents now. Now, because it won't take up much room on the table, I've chosen to use this very tiny milk carton style gift box, which actually is quite a versatile little gift box for lots of things. It's certainly jewellery items, which tend to be small, so rings, earrings, pendant necklaces, cufflinks, some brooches, all of those would be great inside of this box. You know, the box would be a good wrapping option for those. Now I've even used this box for 10 £1 coins just as a different stocking filler type gift. So, you know, it has lots of uses. The other thing, I have slightly adapted this box, and I'll show you that at the end of the video, for storing craft items, and I find it brilliant for that. So this is the box. So it's an A5 style box. It's made from a piece of A7 card, so you will get 8 of these boxes out of a single A4 sheet of card. Now I've utilised some die cuts, as you can probably see, and I've also used a band style closure, which is a type of closure for cartons that I like. It means that they retain their appearance after they've been used quite a lot, and you know, you can embellish this band in any way you want. In this case I've used ribbon, and that can be colour coded to your event. Once you open it up, for this particular favour, I've actually incorporated a little bottle or jar of candy. So let's have a look. This is another colour in here. It's got some yellow candy in this case. It's just got a cork stopper, and I've bought these little jars off eBay, so I'll give you as much information on them as I can in the description area. I won't include the eBay link because you know, that particular advert may disappear over the next few weeks, but I'll give you what information I can. The candy themselves, these are called Millions, and again, I've got these off the internet. They come in all different colours. I've got a few here to show you, and flavours, and you can get them mixed as well if you want. So I'll give you the website where I purchased them from, because the guy was very helpful. But you know, you may be able to get them from another source if you're not in the UK. So let's just retain one of those here. Now additionally, I've included a raffle ticket in the box. Now this is really just to inspire you. A raffle for your occasion may not seem appropriate for you, but I just felt that in this particular instance, you're giving every single gift something, every single guest rather, something to go home with. And you know, something maybe they can recycle, so a little jar with a nice little gift box. But one or two of your guests could also be the winner of another extra special gift, and that could be drawn by the bride, the groom, the best man or maid of honour in the case of a wedding, or the host or hostess in the case of a party or other similar event. So the only other thing I would say is, if you're not into candy for your guests, then you know, something healthy, sunflower seeds would certainly fit in something like this. Or I have seen instances where these little jars for parties have simply been used as messages in the bottle. So just a message has been enclosed in the bottle. So that's a few ideas for you to work with perhaps. And I think maybe now we can just clear the decks and start creating. Now this small box requires a very small piece of card. In this case it's A7 in size, so standard size, and that is actually 4 1/8 of an inch by 3 inches. And as I mentioned earlier, you will get 8 of these out of a standard A4 size piece of card. Now I will be including a table of card sizes, scoring indications, all of that sort of thing in diagram form at the end of my video, so you won't need to be taking any notes during this tutorial. Now, for the sake of those of you who have been watching my tutorials, I'm not going to go into as much detail for this little milk carton as I ordinarily would, because it's really just a smaller version of the A5 milk carton that I showed you how to make earlier in the year. So if any of you are new to milk cartons and you find that there's a lack of information in this tutorial and you're struggling at all, which I hope you won't be, but if that's the case, then it might be worth you looking at the A5 milk carton tutorial, and I will put a link to that in the description area for you, just in case that's necessary. Okay, so let's get on with scoring. Now I'm going to be scoring on the wrong side of my card. I've placed it in landscape mode, so I'm across the top here. I've extended it to the right hand side to 4 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to score at 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch and 4 inches. I'm then going to turn that card anti-clockwise and score at 1/4 of an inch, at 1 inch and at 2 1/4 inches. And I'm then going to turn it clockwise again and score down to that first line at 1/2 an inch and at 2 1/2 inches. And at that point we can remove our scoring board and just return to the South Hill mat. So I'm now going to just flip my card over onto the right side and put in the last set of score lines, which are these diagonal score lines that help the top of our box to close. So just in 2 of those top cells. And we're using that little tiny score line that was the last score line that we did with our scoring board. So if I just show you that, I'm hoping that you can see. So just in 2 sections only, but I will provide a pattern for you in the form of a diagram at the end of this video, so you'll be able to have a visual as to what you're aiming for. So we can now fold and score, or crease rather, all of those score lines. And just in case you're new to this, when you do that, you do need to try and line up all your fold lines on both sides of the card, just to make sure everything ends up nice and square. So I'll quickly do that. This is quite a small box, so it won't take long. So that's all the straight line folds done. So I just need to do these little angled ones now in the corners. Just encouraging them to form. Finding a flat surface and applying pressure. So we now just need to prepare our box for construction. So we need to remove this little corner here because that's not needed. And when we cut this away, I tend to remove all evidence of the fold line as well, just so it doesn't interfere with the base of the box when we put it together. So once you're rid of that little corner there, we're just going to cut down these fold lines at the bottom of the box. So the other end from the diagonal shapes, it's the one at the bottom. And in this instance, I cut down the middle of the fold, trying to keep those cut lines as straight as possible, because that will help you square up the box when you come to put it together. Now the first thing that we're going to do in terms of constructing our box is to put the sides together. Now because this is such a small box, and because we've used a standard piece of card size, so A7, and that's enabling us to get 8 of these out of a piece of A4 card, the actual overlap that we are left with in order to join our box together is very, very small. So my experience of this is that it's advisable to use a strong glue that you know is going to have longevity. So I am using my normal PVA glue because I know that that absorbs into the card on both sides, and as a consequence it does form a good joint, even though it maybe takes a bit longer to take a hold than something like double-sided tape. So I'm just going to apply some of my glue along this edge now. And then I still take the same approach. I focus mainly on the main body of my carton. That's what I'm concerned with in the first instance. And I'm just making sure that those fold lines line up nicely. And that is the thing, you've got a little bit of leeway with the PVA because it doesn't take straight away, so you can slide the joints along a little bit as well. So now once that has formed a bond of sorts, even though that's not absolutely dry, I can look at this top section of the box, and normally as long as the main body's gone into place, the rest will fall into place, and I can then set that down on a flat surface and just use my bone folder to apply some pressure along the join. So I'm now going to glue the flaps up on the base of my box, and for aesthetic purposes I do pay a little attention to detail. So I do the side flaps first, so wherever you've got these triangular shapes, those are the flaps we're going to be tackling, so the opposite flaps. So we'll put the rest out of the way. Now these just overlap slightly, as you can see here, so I can apply some glue to the edge of one side on the outside, and on the inside similarly some glue on the edge, and then I'll just spread that about a bit. It doesn't matter if the glue goes over this area because the other flaps will cover it. And then what I can do is line them up nice and squarely, because you've cut those flaps squarely, so they should line up squarely. And you can also use these other two flaps to position. Apply some pressure from the inside, just till it goes off. It's the trouble with the PVA, it doesn't go off very quickly. Just until it's got a hold. And I'm going to just sit that down so that I can apply some pressure from the inside as well. Now the last flap, I do like the last flap to go down to be my front flap, because on a box this size I think it does make a difference. So wherever this join is, and sometimes you can see it more easily from the inside of the box as well, that's the back flap. And that's the one we're going to put down next. So glue again. I like to make sure that gets to the sides of the flaps. Then we'll just line that up nice and squarely again. In this case we can set it down. And then it's just the last flap that we've got to do. Find with PVA, as long as you can get some pressure on, it sort of at least bonds in places. So there we go. And then I just like to make sure that none of the outsides of these flaps is protruding. So I use my bone folder just to encourage them to stick along the edge of the base of the box. Gives a softer look to it. And that's our box ready for embellishment now. Now I have used a couple of die cut shapes for my embellishments in this instance. They're both from a Spellbinders die cutter. One's this Nestabilities Majestic Elements, and it's called a Nobel rectangle. So, but I'll put information in the description area for these in case you want to know what they are. So there's that one, and the second one that I've used is, again, as I say, Spellbinders, but in this case it's Shapeabilities, and it's called Vintage Lace Accents. So those are the two die cutters that I've used for this project. Now the first one that we're going to have a look at is this little die cut shape that's, I hope you can see that, it's just this little one at the top here, this lacy shape. Now that's come from the Vintage Lace Accents, and one of those die cuts, if I show you, it's sort of a long border style, thinlet style of die cut, and it produces this lacy border shape. So all I'm going to do is take one section of these. I know that each of these measure 1 inch, so, and that's the width of my box. So I'm just going to cut through so that I've just removed one of those shapes, and that's what I need for my box. Now, although, as I've said, my box is 1 inch wide, you do need to make sure that you've got the front as well. So if you did follow the method I use, and your last flap to go down was the front flap, you know that this is the front of your box. So the other way of checking, of course, is where the join is. So the front of your box is where you're going to place this die cut shape. Now a dry run is advisable, because although the box is 1 inch wide, if these folds haven't gone, if they've gone just slightly one side than the other, then sometimes this can be a bit wider, and I like to just make sure that it fits all right, and you can then trim the shape back accordingly. One of the things that I do find is that these corners can sometimes protrude, so I ordinarily just chop them away to avoid that, and they're going to be hidden behind the closure most of the time anyway, so we'll now look at sticking that on there. Now if you've seen me stick fiddly bits and pieces up before, you'll know I use a lot of glue. So I've brought in my absorbent kitchen roll, or if you've got a similar absorbent tissue, that will work just as well. And actually that's white on white, isn't it? So I apply quite a lot of glue to these fiddly shapes, because I really want the whole thing to be stuck down and not just little bits and pieces. So actually that is quite a lot of glue on there, but better that way, I think. So I just want to make sure that all of the back of that card is covered. Got it all over my fingers as well, but never mind. There we go. So that's got a thorough coating of glue, loads of it actually, more than I would normally use. So at this point I'm going to rest that in my absorbent towel. If I was to try and stick that on my box now, that glue would ooze everywhere, and even though it dries clear, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing of things. So I'm just taking off any excess glue by dabbing it on that absorbent towel. So I hope you can see there that it's all of that now I know is sticky, but I'm not going to have any glue that oozes. So I now want to position that on the front of my box so that it's central to this little fold line and everything's lining up nicely, and I can now apply pressure to make sure that that PVA glue starts to take a hold. Now before that dries off too much, so well, let's backtrack a bit. I'm applying more pressure to this base section here than the top section because there's a fold behind this top section. So once you know that that is in place at the bottom, then close your box effectively by just putting it down on a flat surface and applying pressure on the top here. Those fold lines will automatically start to bend, and you really want to do that whilst that glue is still damp, because it'll harden off as it dries, and then that bend won't form quite so easily. Now I should probably mention that there is a reason why we have applied that embellishment prior to doing our band closure, and that's because the band closure, if I show you on this other one, this band actually fits over the top of that embellishment. So we've added another thickness aspect to the top of our box, and our band needs to be able to fit over that as well. I'm doing this with the wrong hand. So you do need to make sure that any thickness that you're applying to the top of your box needs to be put on prior to you creating your band closure. So I just felt I ought to point that out for you. So we can now look at our second embellishment further down the box, and I don't know whether you can see on there, it's actually the smallest of this set of embellishments. So it's this shape here in the middle without the circle in the middle. Actually this circle is the smallest, so it's the second smallest, and that creates this shape here like that. It's almost like a ribbon threader thing. So that's what we're going to be using for our main box embellishment, and that is going to go on here. Now I'll do that, I'll glue this up off camera and then come back and show you how to fit it, save a bit of time, but that's basically where we're positioning it. Right, so I've glued all of that off and taken off my excess glue off camera, and I can now just place this on the front of my box below that other embellishment in that little remaining panel. And I know from this embellishment, if possible, to get this edge on one edge, the outside edge, and a similar scenario going on the other side, because they will more easily turn that corner. Now I just want to show you, once you've got that panel placed, you want to start working on these corners. So if we fold the rest of that embellishment round the corner, then just make sure that you check these corner sections and apply pressure with a bone folder or similar tool, because as soon as that bend forms in that card, it either wants to lift on this side or on this side. So you just need to make sure that everything is sticking down, because you don't want anything protruding that may catch on things and end up tearing your box. So we'll do the same on this side. Just check that. And that is the benefit of using PVA glue in this instance. It gives you a little bit more time in between applying the glue and getting everything stuck down. Well, that's always one of my worst fears, a knock on the door in the middle of a tutorial, but there, no harm done, and that's my embellishment now, well and truly stuck down. And we can move on now to our closing mechanism. And for that, I've just got a thin strip of card that's 1/4 of an inch wide and over long. So this is, what have we got here? Let's have a quick check. Just over 4 3/4 inches long, so quite a long length of that. All I'm going to now do is wrap this around the top of my box. So close my box up as tight as I can, place the card behind the box or whatever's comfortable for you. You're basically just wrapping it round. So once that's in that position, I'm forming like a hairpin fold so that it goes completely around the back and the front of my box, and then I'm folding it again. And just trimming off the excess. Now in actual fact, I'm just going to make sure, double check this fits the other way up, because it should do. This is actually how it's going to fit on my box at the front. Normally the join here would be at the back, but I've cut it slightly back to a point where I know it's going to be covered by my ribbon, and that means that at the back of the box we're going to have a nice stretch of uninterrupted colour with no join, and that's going to look neater. So having done that dry fit, we can now take it off our box, and I tend to keep it in that sort of area so that I know where I need to apply glue, which bit is overlapping the other bit. So this one I know is going to go down underneath the top section. So I'm going to apply a little bit of glue there, and I'm also going to now open that out and apply some glue under there. I can then spread that a little bit down the length there, as long as it's not beyond the piece where the overlap is not going to occur. And I can now fit that back on my box. So close the box up, just nip the end here where it's dry on the right hand side, encourage that round the front, just making sure that you square everything up as much as you can. And because there's some slip with that PVA glue, I can then sort of push it a little bit tighter if necessary, and just allow that to go off. Like just it might be worth, if you've had a lot of glue, it might be worth just moving it a little to make sure that it's not gluing to your box, because you don't want that. So we can just let that go off for a moment before we look at applying our bow. So once that's had a chance to go off, that glue, we can look at applying a little bow to that. And I've just made that earlier out of 6mm gross grain ribbon, and you can see how these tails are sort of sticking out, and I'm going to control those when I glue the bow in place. So in order to glue that, I swap over to my Yoo-Hoo all-purpose adhesive, because I find that that's a lot better with fabric. And I do use a cocktail stick when I'm using this Yoo-Hoo glue, because otherwise it can go all over the place. So as soon as you squeeze the tube, more comes out than you actually want or need, and then it doesn't stop oozing. So I found that I can take off the amount that I need, which as you can see is not a huge amount, and that tube can go upright into a jar, and hopefully no more will ooze out. So I'm just going to apply some glue. I'll show you how I do this. So some glue to the back of that knot, but also tuck some along the back of the bow as well, underneath where these tails are going to be positioned. You just need to be careful not to apply glue on these lower sections here, because otherwise they may end up sticking to your box, and you need this to come off your box with your band closure. So hopefully that will help you. So here we go. I'm just going to put that in place, and you can see how that's going to cover that join as well. So in the first instance, just set it in place, and you might also notice that that ribbon width is about 1 inch wide, so as wide as my box. And as I'm doing that, I can pull these tails into a position where I want them, and then apply the pressure to either side of this knot, really, in order to make sure that that glue is gluing the bow down, but also gluing the back of these tails into a position which means that my tails won't move out, sort of out here, and that will start to hold them where I want them as well. So we'll just give that a moment to go off before we just trim those tails back to a length that is desirable for us. So once we're sure that that's just gone off enough that if we tug on it at all it's not going to pull the bow out of place, we can just trim back to a length that we prefer. And you know, it's a matter of choice, as I've often said in my tutorials, but I seem to like something about that sort of length, so just trim that back. So that leaves us with just our final embellishment, which, if we look at this original, I've just used one of my cold porcelain flowers just to add a little something extra to the center there. Now, if you haven't got cold porcelain flowers, buttons would be a reasonable replacement, I think. Also, there's a number of things out on the market that would adequately replace that cold porcelain flower. However, if you really want to use a cold porcelain flower, there is a video tutorial ready for you, and I'll include a link in the description area so that you can easily gain access to that if you want to go down that route yourself. So now I do make all my own cold porcelains, so if you haven't heard me say so before, I know that it contains a large amount of PVA glue, and therefore I find that PVA glue is a very good glue for bonding it. So I'm just going to put a little cold porcelain flower, a little PVA glue on the back of that flower, and then I'm just going to have a look to see if that's going to sit better in any particular direction, because the petals are often different sizes, so they can sometimes look better in a certain direction. So I think I'm going to put him down that way, and I just really put an edge of the flower down so that I can gauge whether it's reasonably essential, and then just let it drop into place with that glue on the back. And then I'm going to leave it just to dry off completely. Right, so now that that's gone off enough to hold that little flower in place, all that leaves for me is to put in my gift. So we're just going to open that up. I tend to like to squash these out the other way to give me a bit more space. Unfortunately, I haven't got blue sweets, but the pink goes nicely, so they can go in with that. And I'll just curl my raffle ticket a little bit and pop that down the side there, so that's in there as well. Put my little band closure back on the top, and that's our Favour ready to go. So as usual, I like to show you some different colorways, and I have prepared one or two for you. So we've got a sort of reddish maroon one here. The green one you've already seen, and I've also created a purple one for you. Now all of those have been done with a white background, and then the colour on the top in the embellishments is kept more to a minimum. So just in case you prefer bolder colours, what I've done is the opposite colourway in each of those as well. So we've got a purple with the white contrast, the green as well, then the turquoise one for the equivalent of the one we've made today, and lastly the maroon one. So that completes this tutorial today. I hope that that does inspire any of you looking to create your own favours. Don't forget in the meantime that there are diagrams and tables with card scoring details, that sort of thing, coming up in the next few clips, and you know, that's there to help you. Also, there is additional information for you in the description area. Thank you very much for your time today. I do appreciate it, and hopefully you'll be able to join me next time.